Russian President Vladimir Putin is set to touch down this evening in Pyongyang for a two-day state visit. He will meet with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. And according to Russian state media, the pair may sign a comprehensive strategic partnership. Now, this will be Mr. Putin's first visit to the reclusive nation in 24 years. Well, back in July 2000, he met with Kim Jong-un's father, and he's kept up the high-level exchanges in recent years. Well, the pair held their first summit in April 2019 in Vladivostok. At this meeting, Mr. Putin and Mr. Kim promised to forge closer ties. Well, the Russian leader offered to help break the deadlock over the North's nuclear weapons program. Now, a second summit was held in September 2023 in the Russian Far East, with war and weapons high on the agenda. It was following these talks that the West became increasingly concerned about the two nations drawing closer. Well, about a month later, the U.S. accused North Korea of sending weapons to Russia to support its war in Ukraine. Soon after, North Korea successfully launched its first spy satellite. South Korea believes that Russia provided technical help with this. And in January this year, Washington says that Moscow used short-range ballistic missiles sourced from North Korea in strikes against Ukraine. Pyongyang has repeatedly denied Western accusations that it has been giving Moscow military hardware. But ahead of the trip, Vladimir Putin said that he appreciates North Korea's firm support of Russia's military operations in Ukraine. The Russian leader will be in Pyongyang for 2 days before heading to Vietnam. And for more on this visit, let's bring in Dr. John Nielsen Wright, Associate Professor, Modern Japanese Politics and International Relations, University of Cambridge. Well, thanks so very much for joining us this evening, Professor. First up, what exactly is driving Putin's, so-called Asian charm offensive with visits to North Korea and Vietnam? I guess it's about the timing. Why now?
Well, as your introduction sort of rightly points out, this has been a relationship that has been developing over some time between the North Korean and Russian leaders. And it reflects, I think, Moscow's view that there are real interests to be gained by strengthening cooperation between authoritarian regimes, pushing back against those democracies, of course, the United States and its allies, which are helping Ukraine prosecute the war against Russia. Russia, of course, is increasingly concerned about the strengthening ties between the US and Seoul and Tokyo. Last year, we saw, of course, the important Camp David agreement that signified closer alliance cooperation between the US and its two most important Northeast Asian allies. And this is really an effort, I think, on the part of President Putin to capitalize on the mutual benefits that he and his North Korean counterpart stand to gain from this relationship. You've mentioned, of course, the provision of critical military technology, artillery shells from North Korea to Russia to assist it in the war against Ukraine. And from the North Korean perspective, there are a whole gamut of things that it stands to gain from this. Financial support from Russia in releasing or moderating the international sanctions regime, energy support, very important for North Korea. And of course, opportunities to earn hard currency by sending that critical military technology to Russia, as well as possible deals to involve North Korean workers, perhaps providing construction support for Russia's infrastructure interests in the occupied parts of Ukraine. So this is really both a political and a pragmatic, diplomatic and economic, and as you've also noted, security partnership between the two countries.
Yeah, so you've mentioned quite a number of goals there. They're mutually compatible between these two countries. Well, in the meantime, you've got neighboring countries, we've got the international community. They're closely watching this visit that Putin will be going. But in terms of the sort of developments, I mean, we've talked about arms deals, energy deals, but what are the specific developments in relations that you think these countries will be looking out for, that you think would trigger the alarm bells, and that is going to, sort of inspire a response from these countries?
Well, the biggest worry, and this is, I think, reflected in all of the discussion we're seeing in the run-up to this meeting, is about the nature of the so-called comprehensive strategic partnership that has been discussed. One of the things that the North Koreans are desperate to secure is important technical support to bolster their satellite program. And that satellite program is designed to enhance the deterrence capabilities and the offensive capabilities that North Korea has been seeking to develop. marrying both its ballistic missile technology and its very real and present danger from its nuclear program. Now, we don't have any concrete evidence to date to prove that the Russians have actually delivered on that promise or that suggested deal between the two countries. And for obvious reasons, the United States and its allies worry that anything that Russia might do to materially enhance North Korea's ability to strike both at its neighbors and further afield would be a major escalation. So the Russians, I think, will need to play that very carefully. It's interesting when you look at the composition of the delegation that will be accompanying President Putin. It involves both defense ministers, foreign ministers, but also individuals who represent Russia's space technology capabilities. And they will be looking, I think the US and its allies will be looking very carefully to see what any potential strategic deal might involve, because that would be seen as a major provocation. From Russia's point of view, I think it's probably more likely that we'll see an effort politically and diplomatically to present this new strategic partnership as a rebuttal, if you like, to the strengthened security cooperation between the US, Japan, and South Korea. We've seen, for example, Kurt Campbell, the Deputy US Secretary of State, at the end of May, signifying closer ties between Tokyo, Seoul, and Washington, talking about a new secretariat that will strengthen cooperation. And we've seen joint exercises between Japanese, Korean, and US forces. This is an effort, if you like, by both Moscow and Pyongyang to say, we're ready to push back against that. But they will want to avoid doing anything that is seen as perhaps a step change in terms of the provocations.
Professor, I'm wondering, I'm curious to know, how might China actually view this strengthening of Russia-North Korean axis? And I guess, in a nutshell, what sort of outcome do you think would best serve China's interest in this rather complex geopolitical landscape?
Well, I mean, there are sort of countervailing pressures for the Chinese. On the one hand, of course, China itself is supporting Russia in its military activity indirectly in Ukraine. And that is meaningful for the Chinese in terms of strengthening the so-called axis of authoritarian regimes. But anything that really changes the security dynamic on the peninsula is a source of concern to the Chinese leadership, because anything that enhances the US cooperation with Seoul and Tokyo may strike at China's own strategic interests in the East and South China Seas. And one reflection of that necessary balancing act has been the fact that China itself, on the back of the other trilateral partnership, the China, Japan, South Korea trilateral meeting that took place in Seoul recently, is seeking to strengthen its ties with South Korea. And just today, we've seen a meeting between Chinese and South Korean officials in Seoul to talk about a new security 2+2 partnership between the defense and foreign ministry representatives of both countries. And that's, if you like, an attempt by the Chinese to try and tread this fine line to both keep South Korea engaged, to present itself, if you like, as a moderating influence, to stress the mutual benefits that Seoul and Beijing gain from close cooperation, and to avoid the new partnership between Russia and North Korea developing into something that is much more explicitly focused on security and military issues.
Well, thanks for sharing some great insights there. John Nielsen Wright, Associate Professor, Modern Japanese Politics and International Relations at the University of Cambridge.